Sure.
Any questions before we rock into it?
Okay.
No? Okay.
한국 남년 로수 이거 조사하셔. 다 숨바디.
Okay, so we're on the third one of the four wrong views of the path.
삼대지 저와가시 탈람진 거죠. 삼대세야데 아저 삼대세야데 이세거데. 먼저 망배게 되고래. 담랭이 뉴지 탐제 대전 숨나. 되어함 수캄 수메캄 와. 대전 숨나. 되어함세야데 땅은 또 대영아도 롱제 왔음. 되어 수타디로 레자 그저라. 아니 그저 롱제 그저라다. 아니 미세게 되자게 민고란 되와라도 되와 되차 저 초대죠.
Okay.
닝디 냠바 쉬시다도. 되자게 초대죠. 대제 강사들이 되와서 대내들 되감시. 다소 대영아들 롱제고라 속타지로 rek장아디 대영아들 롱제제 아니 시바 페이지 아니 차신제 안딩에리 디코리 디모리 예레 띵아들 롱바지고라 띵아들 롱바지고라 도스 저래로 제제 땅도 도스 대대여라 근데 미세 삼바 심 때문에 요만 땅도 셈바디 내외 미 심데 때문에 요만 땅한다 해라 심베 축초죠 쉬우죠라다 이 덴바레도 왔다 베제는 쉐어나 시 라투가 등사로
Sorry. Okay, so this third one sees certain levels of concentration as the path to liberation. So these concentration states, these concentrated states of mind, that is for some, they hold that as a state of liberation. But so to give a bit of background, the Buddhists hold to three realms, right, of existence. So there's the desire realm, and then there's the form realm gods and the formless god realms. So we are said to be in the desire realm. So everything like animals, this is all, everything we see is basically the desire realm. And certain gods are desire realm gods. But this realm is primarily determined by sensory experience. So the six senses, or let's start with the five senses. So we have all the sensory input from the five senses, right? Like sight, smell, touch, etc. like that. And based on that, then we come to held views of like him and her and mine and my country. And because of this attachment and aversion arises and things are not stable. So we say this this realm is a desire realm because this attachment, this... So it's dochak is a word in Tibetan, and it's kind of like grasping or binding to this kind of stuff. I guess I don't. It doesn't really come across very well in English. Sorry about that. But that's what determines this desire realm, is that it is primarily attachment to these sensory experiences. That's what determines this, is why it's called the desire realm.
다 딜라 니무메가 통한데와 되베게 네 되영아가 미베 그 먼저 롱제데 니 삼바 요면도라 아디야 오면도 다딜레 삼바 때문에 체크나 생물 시대유나 사네 공자 신의 토변데 아니 신의 토변나 디게 상마 드세요면 되베 되자 시당 콘로마게 잘라스도 요마레다 와 신의 토변나 아무 신의 토변나 디서로 너는 내가 비로 신의 토변나다 시우레고 신의 토변 아 신의 토변데 신의 삼대에서다 수미 속이 심 토고요 아 삼대에다 삼대 당고 니와 숨바 시와스다 데라 그런 띵이지 때문에 차네 민따로 제가 데라 삼대기 겨와가시 탈람되지 말아봐 삼대기 겨와가시 삼대에서다 다 삼대에다 삼대에서 concentration 때문에 시우대도고요 와 대신에 민따로 삼대 당군이와 숨바 시와데라 아니 삼대 겨와가 식스도 되나네 믹세지 겨와지 믹세지 스페셜지 두둑제네 얘라 간주 당기시에 봐 두시메베 뇽죽사지로 어디 아니 두시메베 뇽죽디 아니 탈람디지 봐 뒤심에 념중대 탈람되지 마. 어디시야? 탈람 말하고 탈람 많이 탈람지 마. 삼대 겨와가 시사 삼대 될샤 삼대 당분이 와서 시와스. 아니 되네야 아니 속견에 내가 빌레도 아니 나 숨미스 나가대 나지대 제메 시티스 아니 숨미들 시체 삼대들 시체 아니 되어지 먼저 감 숨시 뒤용도 감 숨세 남과산 예배 최는 감 숨셔가 감 숨, 되어 감 수가 숨에 감 게.
So then this next one is holding certain levels of concentration to be the state of liberation, right? So what we see, what we experience now is these people, they see this, like the Buddha said, as not lasting happiness. So whatever we experience within this desire realm, whatever we get within this wealth, whatever, it has no essence, and it doesn't lead to lasting happiness. You know, whatever experience we have, it fades and so forth. So they then hold on to this meditative concentration. So they develop very strongly this concentration. And in this state, all these discursive emotions that cause us suffering, anger, attachment, jealousy, so forth, they don't arise. They don't arise in this state. And then as you develop up into there's four formless realm concentrations, so it's called concentration 1, 2, 3, 4, right? And within that, there's different divisions. I don't know. Did you get it? No. But they hold this state, this particular state of stable concentration that we talked about before, this non-discriminating, when your mind reaches the state of complete non-discrimination, so there's no sort of good, bad, left, right, any of those discriminating thoughts. When they reach this level of concentration, they hold that to be liberation, right? And this is what is meant by holding this level of concentration to be the path to liberation. Whereas in reality, it's not a final liberation. Although you're temporarily free from this manifestation of these discursive emotions, you haven't actually attained final liberation. So just to clarify, they say we have the desire realm, and then there's these first concentrations, 1, 2, 3, 4. So 4 form realms, and then 4 formless realms, which is, again, as your concentration gets more and more subtle, then you go into the formless realms.
네 시바데 동네 dense지 타만 매버지 봐서가 세상다 뒤에 당기 셰프 다른 경우도 셰프 나시 당보 두시메 님주데다 대내서 타바 토스 두시 배로 가에 내가 타바 토스 삼으러 네 배전 배디들다 로베 이게 숨제 시병 앞에 된데 될까 요런 거 대도 와라 될 냐마샤 아데 딩이지데 누가 얘도 그 두시 내용으로 와 이 가브레 디 마브레 디 야브레 디 두자 내용들 아니 심투용 거라 아다 타바 토스는 양자 동에 수리해도 제가 다 동에서야 돼 땡드세야 타와 민도 매번 이상 동에서야 돼 큐네 매번 차려야 남배시에 타와 저러 진짜 큐네 민도 타와 동에서야는 양자 동에 수리해도 제가 이상 동에 땡드세야 진이게 탈람디 영하랬다 남배산제 배시에 탈람디 영하랬어 그래서 동에서야 양자 수리해도 결혼서 동에 큐네 배트 세사는 양자래 면적이 네 탈람이 남지시에도 되면도 그래서 동에서야는 동에 수리 양자 연구도 그런 노래에 관한 노래라는 타로 많이 게지 타로 짐바디 추구라다 어디 강의 디테일 어디 시발에다
Okay, so then the last one, seeing that there is no path that leads to the total eradication of suffering. So again, it's a similar view to the one before, but what happens is these beings, they attain this state of concentration, this non-discriminating state of concentration, and then they can spend thousands of years meditating in that state, right? And at that point, there's no manifest sufferings. But over time, what happens is the power of their concentration, after thousands of years, starts to diminish, and then this discrimination starts to come back in, right? Like as the karma runs out, the power of their concentration diminishes, and these thoughts of discrimination come back in. And then the thought arises, because they believe that this state of concentration was liberation, and then when they start to come out of it, and this discrimination, then that thought comes, well, there is no liberation, because they was mistakenly held a state that was not liberation as liberation, and when they come out of it, then the view arises of there is no liberation, because they thought that was the pinnacle. So and then they reject the Buddhist path, because like the Buddhist path says there is a final liberation, and they mistakenly held a state of concentration to be liberation, and when they come out of it, then they reject liberation entirely, like final liberation. So this is then that wrong view arises, that there is no liberation basically. Okay, so that's the 16 finished off.
Yeah.
These meditators in the state of non-discrimination,
Right.
they will probably also have some certain powers, because they'll, the power of clairvoyance, for example, and other powers that come with that kind of concentration. So, would they not be able to make merit with their cities, by helping people, or make some kind of merit to keep going?
Right. So the dushimeba the tingnezeno. Konso dila dini nupa chambo yorero. Give me the nupa chambo yore any big pay. Konso semshin shemba pemba chegi mare sonam saki mare.
Dushimeba yumju nega chega ma. Kola dushiyo ma.
Right.
Dushiyo ma. Man mille pendo chego sa samagona yo ma.
Okay.
Ingizin be nihu na shi chabo.
Right. So, no, they don't have any thought to make merit, because they're in a state of non-discrimination. So there's no self, no others. There's no idea of, benefiting, because there's just this, it's almost like a way of being asleep. Like you're closed off from everything. There's no because to benefit others, you have to have discrimination active, right? So they don't have any thought to create merit, or there's nothing like that.
So they don't even know they're meditating.
So konzo gomgyab hakugidu, hakugidu. No. Temporarily, they don't know. They have no thought of.
Similar pa nyomba maju konde da ya dang de mi shiji gi paru de la pe de yomare jamdi rosa.
Okay, so there's no thought. Oh, I'm here meditating, and there's other things over there. There's just no thoughts like that.
Kesa de namba sanje de nyomba nyomju de la nyomba shaga yomare namba sanje de dingi zinje ro dushi de chedan. 제가 먼저 가도에 네 신명기 꾸는 두시 제기도
오케이.
디 내가야 이제는 남바산제버겠다 이는 디 띵이지 될라 냠바샤기야 말에 될라 냠바샤나 아니 야다파 냠바샤보다 수냠바 다음 마시지게 삼르지네 요마라다
Right.
될라 띵 냠바샤 주고요 말에다 남바산제.
Right. So just to be clear, this isn't a result of a Buddhist path, because we have the motivation to benefit others, right? Especially Maya. So we have this thought. So we discriminate between self and others. When they enter this state through their concentration, they're not motivated by this. So therefore they just go into a state of non-discrimination, where there's no thought of self and others. So there's no idea I'm here, or not benefiting or not benefiting, doesn't enter into it.
다 디레 다 덴바시 디 다 도르두지 간게라 도르두지 셰이나로 내가 좀 보래 덴바시 아니 동해 덴바당 군주 덴바세데 나랑도 단다 요가 디레다 나랑도 풍고디 동해 덴바래 단다 나랑도 수 풍고지 여러 대당 먼저 동해 근데 상범하기로 잘 인데도 저도 상마 동해를 해도 상마 동해 덴바래 안디 유디 먼저 차단 되는 연구도 아니고 그래서 군주된 말 녀모 차단도 녀모도 군주된 말 다들 체다가 나라요 그 녀모 군주된 거다 동해되면 남샤요 겨우 치매게 좀 하시는 체다가 나라요 녀모가 빅디게 참고 군주된 말 녀모 여러 녀모 여자 시당 공동아 예 띠무 저도 상마 군주된 말이다.
So, just to briefly go over the Four Noble Truths again, right? Now, these are very important and great significant meanings. So, to clarify the first two, the truth of suffering and the origin of suffering. So when we say, well, what is the truth of suffering? Well, it's the aggregates, right? The aggregates are the basis for all our suffering. There's the body and mind combination. So these result, all our sufferings come from experiences of these aggregates, right? And then what is the cause for that? The cause for that is the delusions behind it, karma and delusions, which this is the cause for all our difficulties and sufferings. So we're not necessarily talking about this past and future lives or anything like that. If we look at, even in this life, we can see that anger, attachment, jealousy, these minds, these deluded minds, they bring about all our sufferings. Right, yeah.
아니 원컴리 와서로와 콘돔 피직스 쇼로 속도단 셰도 기승셰서 중원시 안중주시 치로 레가델레테네 투구레 셰오디 다드제 니수고나게 제 차셰 수고주디 먼저 수고디 제 레도 제 투도 아니 바고나게 제도 참무직나래 차셰 망고슈지도 파즈 아니 마체버시제 타니워시제 데데여레스 남고산제베 셰고데 고 제도 참여여 봐. 아 맞아로 시. 디버를 동제 여래서 뒤타로 뜨죠. 먼저 빨베 난게 제단 차가는 제도서 뭐도 것이지 타니 오시네. 그들은 그 구여집지. 데데 답차고 내대 여래서 남바산제에 로웨잉에 제리 거래도 로웨잉에
is it Vasubandhu?
No. Vasubandhu.
Vasubandhu.
제리 was scholar. 이런 도서 상마 시에도 와. 딱 컨트롤 피지를 하래. 부드스인데 제일 컨트롤 피지를 하래. 아니 되네 이 동네 되면은 따르블레기도 왔다. 따르블레기도 필로소피가 그리고 와. 이 동바다 다음에 남자 시에도 따르블레기도 와. 따르지 줄룩 수지를 여마. 다 난거라면서 따르 여마. 따르 켈레베이나 찍레직 때네 좋아디 켈레베이나 아니 컨저 솔라다 아말라다 데 시와라다 둘이 라로요라
Okay,
디켈렌토고야 말이다 지금직 때네 중화레스야디 남샤디 남산제베 밀타루 최근에 남산제베 따루 남미시 따루 때네 중에 남샤디 이제 철루시다나라 요마다디 지금 남산제베 디 말에 가서 오래서 직시에나 데 텔렌시 오래서 말해 직시에 잡아지 수수 따제체 아니 뭐wen지 등구도 캐네 뭐wen지 등구도 뭐도 캐만에 감바존데데 손으로 예시에버디 전화도 이제 마시 따제체네 뭐wen지 당 예시에 등구면도 전화도 뭐wen지 캐렌도 예시에 캐렌 쳐 말했어 근데 이게 덤바다 요마다 덤바신다는 진짜 순님도 예시에 이제 치고를 시행을 예시에 이제 요 말에 신님도 예시에 이제 맞잖아 계란야기 그래라고 예시에 이제 지기 요 말에 계란다제 채워랬어 그래도 그 랍제체 랍제 첨부로 아대 찍들라 쉬우가고 채워 이제 지기 요 말에 계란도 따제 채워랬어야지 또 뭐좀 된데 세상에 빈시시에 어디 동네 되면 나가 거야 사무다에 망고였다 시모변이지
So yeah, this covers off the first two truths, the truth of suffering and the cause of suffering. And if we look at a bit of background as the Buddhist philosophy in general, there's a lot of things in the philosophy that actually matches up with what scientists are discovering now, like in quantum physics. Like, for example, Vasubandhu said that the body or matter, like any material thing, is actually made up of what would be the equivalent of something like atoms, right? Where they don't, and he actually said, like atoms, they don't actually touch, but they just abide there, and the majority of it's space, and they're constantly vibrating like that. So this is actually matching up. I mean, this was 2,000 years ago or something that he came up with this, and now quantum physics is coming up with similar things to what was said by him then. So that from like Vasubandhu was basically like one of the first Buddhist scientists, right? So that's from a scientific point of view, the viewpoint of Buddhism. But also there's the philosophical viewpoint, which is amongst philosophical traditions. Some of the things are similar to other traditions, but in some ways it's very unique. And this view of this dependent origination is something that is unique to Buddhism. Other philosophies, they might have some idea of different aspects, but this dependent origination doesn't actually arise. A lot of them believe things are created by God or there's outside influences, whereas Buddhism holds totally to the law of cause and effect. Everything is a dependent origination, right? And the other thing that's very different is that it's not a belief-based philosophy, right? It's an analytical-based philosophy. So you need to check what is being said and check if it's valid. The Buddha himself said that you should don't believe what I say just because they call me Buddha. Check everything, and when you find it to be valid for yourself, then believe it. So if what is said by Buddhism doesn't actually match up to what's actually going on or the nature of things, then it shouldn't be accepted. It should be checked thoroughly, and once it's been checked thoroughly, then you can accept it or reject it, right? Other religions tend to say things sometimes a bit differently. They say, well, this is the way things are, and you either believe it, accept that it's that way and believe it that way, or maybe you go to hell or you get punished or something like this. So that's not the way the Buddhist viewpoint is. The Buddhist viewpoint is you should check everything thoroughly, and then once you've thoroughly investigated, then check it for yourself, right? Which is very good advice. And that means that there's a lot of things to think about when you look at the Four Noble Truths, so you're going to be quite busy, I guess, checking it all out.
다들 군주님바 셰우디다 남배기 psychology 레벨로 군주님바라 셈다 묘몽바 레다 레스야디 심중 셰바 레스야 레스야디 셰바 심중 셈바 레스니와 심중 셈바 레스니 그래서 레스야디 셰바 제가 셰베 거디 남바 빼 뒤에도 왔다 뒤로와서 psychology로 셰바 거디 그래서 당기면서 기지 셰바나지 단단 누저베 psychology게 consciousness 되는데 공연 셰바라 템바 셰바 델라 디시자로 이루를 저 자두고요. 아니 남바게 이루 델레 차라 망고 쉬우치제 셰고요라고 이루 델라 라과 타워 딩망고 셰고요라고 앞에 셰바 추고래 셰바 추고 네 진짜 네거디 만 트레이닝스 비다 지오이던데 야고요다 롭전 지야 말한 거 범자제 심디 네 칼로 교단게 탑람게다 롭전 지야는 베이직 거란체 롭전 지야던데 베미시 philosophy has a psychology 셰바베 추고레스 한다
추보스나?
Rich
explanation. Okay. So then we get on to the third one, the truth of liberation. The second one, the truth of origin, right? And this is the basis for the Buddhist psychology, right? So then, when we look at the Buddhist psychology, the karma, Simchung Shipa, so the secondary mental consciousness, right? So this karma is described as a secondary mental consciousness. So we have the primary minds and the secondary minds. This action or karma is a secondary mental consciousness. So when we say Western psychology looks at everything from the point of view of the mind arises in dependence on the brain, basically, and then everything comes from there. But from the Buddhist viewpoint, the mind is separate. It's not here. It's something here, and it's much more. There's many different types of mind, right? And because of that, the different types of mind and the subtlety of the different types of minds, there come about many methods for checking the mind, for understanding many ways and techniques to understand how the mind works, both in terms of study and actual meditation. So from the Buddhist psychology point of view, there's a deep and very rich explanation of the mind and how it functions and what it is.
religion이랑 사지 낭배 추래 낭추를 봐. 근데 religion이랑 단지 톱서 말하는 거잖아. 근데 religion 진이여로 봐. 그래서 religion 진이디 직제 엔델의 이지체는 해야 봐. religion 진이디 단다기 구고는 진이 먹고도 와. 이 낭배 추를 따다 로그면도 진이디 다다 상금도 가서. 안과지 그 라바디 이제체는 줘야 말하고 그 딸제체 뭐이지 통금면은 수라나 유차야라면서 이게 세상 다 재리가 차가가 이제 레전게 남과 저한테 빼야고 남벽에 따로 저 찾아야고 지 신베이나 남과디 릴리전 말했다 근데 남배지 사과들 그 남과 산지에서 릴리전 자원인들이 그거 말다 다들 알나야 저다르지요 근데 지난 미망고지 망고치 릴레이션 이시하시고 야고 고쳐나 릴레이션 그 진이 콜링 게 맞다 간다 릴레이션 진이들라 그거는 내가 망고 샤도 그런 저 탭나라 이제 디시나리드즈나 게 진이도 따로다 게 인지되게 장겨와 근데 진이들 남배처럼 도움도 간다 그 아버지 그거 남부산님의 최근에 누구야 말이야 그 뺐다 따제시 뭐이지 통금은 캐만에서도 릴레이션 차가면도 하고 그 제가 다 이날 이제 낭추 써야 돼다 민가를 따고는 인지질을 민가를 따고는 낭추 써야 돼 아니 람데 거기에서 다 이게 이제 템버 타만이 이게 이제 낭배 다들 낭추 다들 낭바산제베게 미드즈 주도시야 말이지 미상매 주도시야 말레스 람데나 거기에나 낭배 주도시야 때 낭바지게 고정하지 켈링고래 남즈 코와세야데 방자에 뭐 켈링치고 요러와 한서 미망고 코반제 켈링치 말와 코와샤네 츠치마에 전이지고 뭐 츠디지고 고고데로와 남배 남주 진이지나 츠디 개정문 말에 겨치마디 개차지고로와 그나 단단 안한테 체리 팅두기 체리가 팅두기 미망고지 츠디 조지르미지 겨치마 고수 말에 캘린식 말봐. 그래서 내일이들라 낭추 계좌에 도사야 맞다. 남대에다 보den사도 컨트롤 주도요 맞다. 컨트롤 비즈니스 말에디 나란지 비즈니스다.
Yes, so then we get on to the last two, the truth of liberation and the truth of the path. So, generally speaking, you say that Buddhism is a religion, but when you actually look at the definition of what a religion, then Buddhism doesn't match up, because religion is based on belief, and Buddhism isn't really based on belief. It's based on investigation and checking things out. So once you investigate for yourself, then you accept or reject. It's not, this is the way things are, you're required to believe it. So it's a different definition, right? And it's based on this intellectual or this thorough checking or investigation. So most people would say, if you ask them what is Buddhism or religion, they'll say yes, but you need to actually check whether it matches up. I guess he says, he's actually looked in the dictionary when he was studying English, looked up what the definition of religion is. And he says that the Buddhist philosophy doesn't match up to this. Right? So, but we use this word, nangcho, in Tibetan, like it means basically kind of insider or inner view. And for us, for the Buddhists, which translates as Buddhist, the last two truths, this truth of liberation, the path to liberation, this is something unique, right? We believe in this path to liberation based on this belief in karma and reincarnation and so forth. Most other people, they don't hold this view, right? They don't hold view of past and future lives. They don't think about these things, right? Like scientists nowadays, they have this process of thorough investigation, but everything is just, they don't have this idea of mind or past and future lives or anything like this. So they're only looking at it from one perspective, right? And they're investigating in that way. And, so therefore, for these people, then their job is not this path, this liberation and the path to liberation. This is our work. This is our job as Buddhists to investigate this path, this liberation and this path to liberation.
다 이제 인상 겨워가지래 다 남과지고 말해 다 지난데 개왕아지 켈리니 출루시나 열어라. 아니 다 지난 출루 마차게 출루 마차게 겨치면 켈리시고를 이슈게 겨치면 켈리시고를. 힌두들도 지다 켈리. 가지게 겨치면 켈리시기도. 추지 켈리잖아. 쳇델레 쳇치마게 사무제 땅도. 다 난과게 쳇치마데 미 겨라고 질레메이나 미 겨레나 주케미도 알아마나서. 다 코나는 겨란다. 코들레 타르와지고도 다 난과 산제로 데레다. 덴데들레 타르와. 다디 수치기 셴이야 말다. zamulinde 나야. 타르와 코들레 타르와지고. 아니 대화 텐드니야 그 타만데 난과 산제 버레메 주신다. 세계 식단 타르와 시다 세고르데. 거기서 타워들 로고 차로다. 근데 타르와 마인기는 타르와 이제 되기도 하고 삼에 요다는데 제산다 코발레 타르와서 되는 니중제. 다 대야 아니 라니 지고 체도 많이 봐. 아니 심지어 탐지에 시도 코발레 타르와 지고도 상담지 난 대과심을 취했어요. 라니 지고 체도 아니 코바 타게스나 아니 대과면 봤습니다. 근데 어디 제와들 얘기를 대면에다 디젠스야 되는 거 산지에 쳐나가 이제 어두슬레다 간다가
So it's not only Buddhists that hold to this view of reincarnation. Most philosophies or religions, hold one way or another to past and future lives, or at least future lives. For example, the Christians, they believe in heaven, and most that I understand, Muslims also believe in rebirth in their version of heaven. Some Hindu philosophers believe in reincarnation, right? But what makes the Buddhist viewpoint different is that it's not enough just to kind of find a good rebirth or posit like just reincarnation. You have to attain the state of the final states of liberation or enlightenment. That's the path. That's where the Buddhist path leads. Now, different philosophies, different religions will hold their own version of liberation that they believe is final. It may be rebirth in heaven or whatever it is. But this is, from the Buddhist perspective, a mistaken belief. What they're holding on to as a final state of liberation is not a final state of liberation, right? They're still bound by karma and rebirth. So that's this. So they're holding on to a non-state of liberation as the state of liberation. So that's from the point of view of the viewpoint. But from the point of view of the conduct, then we look at it in terms of, from the Mahayana perspective, you're not just trying to attain the state of liberation and enlightenment just for your own well-being. It's actually in order to benefit all sentient beings. So based on this, then we engage in the practices to benefit others. So this is why we call the Mahayana vehicle. Then there is this individual liberation or Theravada and Hinayana vehicle, which the focus is on getting yourself out of samsara, but not the thought to benefit all sentient beings. So this differentiates between the great and small vehicles. Vehicle, yeah. Take love na vehicle, right?
vehicle the Pali tradition, Sanskrit tradition, Pali Hinayana, Mahayana, Tanya Pali tradition, Sanskrit tradition, they are Mahayana, Hinayana, there's the Tsigdi, Yawutigi.
Oh, okay.
The Pali tradition, Sanskrit tradition,
So, okay. So Hinayana, I'm sorry, he's saying that the Hinayana and Mahayana did Pali, though.
Tsigdi Pijishiga, Tsigdi Yawutiga, Tsigdi Hamming, Mahayana, Tsigdi High, Hinayana, Law.
Right. Oh, okay.
Hinayana Pali tradition. Pali tradition.
Right, okay.
And Mahayana Sanskrit tradition.
Right. Okay. So
yeah.
Right. So he's saying this Hinayana and Mahayana. These really, the wording is not the best because it basically says high vehicle and low vehicle, or big vehicle, small vehicle. So it's not the way to think about it. So the way it actually originates is that the Theravada, and I think that's the word they use to describe their own religion, is the Pali tradition, and then the Mahayana, which is what is the Sanskrit tradition. So if we say the Pali tradition and the Sanskrit tradition, it's a more clear way of saying it, rather than saying the big and the awesome and the not so awesome.
대 김제야고도 김제야고도 사실은 동바점된데 당보 니시스와 니시도 상황 빨리게 송도 대메가라 미만차게 네팔리 랭귀지 피지지게서와
Right.
대바시다 아니지데네 네네 파라밀라시 창조소든 전번예시와 멤버네스 포 멤버네스 도저 상마 빨리게 가는 시에도 빨리가 아니 되네 다 동반이 있거든. 시라징보단 얘도 뭐 두서 상마 먼저 저 트랜슬레이터 산스크리트에 트랜슬레이터 체로 저상 두서 상마 산스크리트 삼지되게 데 띵사 자가나라 깨데 다 냠바다 자가나라 깨데 비주신이야 말이야. 산스크리트 때 냠데 자가
Okay.
자가 그러나게 깨데 이나 이제 냠데 이게 비주신이야 말이야. 어디 대 동반이다. 내가 이거 그 상황이 산스크리트가 티즈를 좀 되게.
Okay. So the reasoning for this is because the Buddha taught the path, this Theravada method, the path like the Four Noble Truths, right? And most of the followers who follow that follow the scripture in Pali, right? And in Pali then they have the main teachings being things like the four mindfulnesses, the Eightfold Path, and so forth, right? Whereas the teachings on emptiness, Tongpanyi, emptiness, come from the Sanskrit writings, come from the Sanskrit scriptures. So this is where the differentiation comes. Now, the Sanskrit used to be a language that flourished very strongly in India, but now really it's gone down, and you don't find any much, well, if it's an active language at all, but there's not much writing or anything like that done in Sanskrit anymore. But this is the way to look at it, that this view of the Four Noble Truths, and this is the Pali scriptures, and then the emptiness and these things came out in the Sanskrit scriptures. So that's why it says the Pali tradition and the Sanskrit tradition.
네. 다디네 아니 다 람 티젠이 람서로 와다 티젠이 람라야 아니 솔람 졸람 통람 공람 밀람 시제 아니 람가요레 단단한서 딜라도 앞에 시라님 보통도 시라님은 다이타 가데고 바르상 보디 소아시도 네 다이타 송시서 가데가데사 데 총람 송 졸람데 송 통람데 네 바라상거디 보디 소아사데 네 공람데 송 밀람 시속세제 간다 디게 단다 시라님 보나나데 나스도 다이타 가데가데 바르상거디 보디 소아사데 아니 총람 졸람 통람 공람 밀람 람가 그남샤데
Tayada Tsolam, no?
Tayata is Songshig, Solam, Gadi is Solam, Gadi is Nila, Solam, the Jolam, Gadi Lagdo. Tayata is songs, call song, parody song, Sanjay songs, Tayata song. Gadi is Solam the song, Gadi is Gadi knew the Jolam song. Died a Paragadi said the Tonamche, Parasam God said the Konamche. Budi so said any Milon Sanjay Komba. The Nag the Lamma the race for that.
So this Sanskrit tradition or Mahayana tradition can be broken down into the 5 paths, right? So the path of accumulation, preparation, seeing, meditation, and no more learning. Now these paths can be seen when we look at the Heart Sutra and when you go to the mantra, Tayata Gati Gati Paragati Parasamgati Bodhisoha. So this in this mantra represented the 5 paths. So the first Gati, so Tayata Gati, this first Gati represents the path of accumulation. Second Gati represents the path. Oh, do you know what page it's on here? 16. Okay, yeah. So page 16 of this book at the bottom, there's the mantra. So the first, so it says Tayata Gati.
Tayata is Songshig. 맞아 근데 콜 대대로 콜네 산지가 살아야 송수 죽스
Okay.
송식
So
송식
to
다야 타
traverse, I guess.
송식 거로 산지에 살 다 산지에 살 컨데 도래 아니 람검지 도라
Okay.
나오지
So the Tayada means to like travel or traverse. So where are we going to? We're going to this enlightenment, right? So then then it goes, well, how do you get there? Well, you get there through these 5 paths. And the first one being the first one represented by the first Gadi being the path of accumulation. The second Gadi, the path of preparation. Then when it says Paragati, this is the path of seeing. And then Parasamgati is the path of meditation. And then Bodhisoha is the path of no more learning or complete enlightenment.
어디 다 소람 다디 마 제브데스 도이나 소람세데 장주가 셈로와 안로다 심제 탐제 그거 디그 권을 남아시고 내가 심제 탐제 라니가 세대기 파마지에 니까지 친구이 마상당 나 까지 친구이 뭐데 테나 아니 데절라 동해 통지다 도주 동해를 태워지 치고도 다 동해를 태워지 내 치고도 말을 까지 친구 믿어서 강에 이르상도 나는 먼저 스스로 누버디어 말와 미신다 동해 제주 파자 스스로 동해 이 갑두고요 말와 다스르도 다지셔로 배샤 펜도도 배샤기 심지기 동해 심기 동해 세도도 배샤기 디프레션 매우 소도도 소도면도 하다 봐 초고 소도도 하다 프레지던트 오지윤 소도도 완전 정보 유니 야면은 마 잡제로 넌 멤버의 샤주 체니 동안 믿어 다 술은 누구도 상당한 산제 야지 다만 산제로 여기나 아니 그 대제 감담에 와신 이제 미리 거래 최대인지 그 시스템이 이거야 배그로 이제 아니 생기네가 나자도 다지 산제에서도 다 산제에 고마 터고도 세상에 심지어 탐지기 된 지혜지 등에 산제이 고마 터지고도 상당한데 아니 샘지에 봐서 다 연구해 봐 샘지
Okay, so this path of accumulation actually starts once one generates the mind of bodhicitta. So this is when you enter the actual genuine path to enlightenment. Now, how does this mind of bodhicitta arise? Well, it arises first when you see all sentient beings as being connected, as being our mothers. Through countless lifetimes, all beings have been our mothers. So we see that all beings are our mothers. And then, based on that, just as if your mother in this life was suffering, you'd want her to be freed from suffering, you get this wish, genuine wish to free all sentient beings from their sufferings. But it's not just like a wish that, oh, may they be free. It actually has this aspect of taking that responsibility on yourself. Like, it's my responsibility to free all sentient beings from suffering. Now, once you decide that, then you sort of look, well, how am I going to do that? And it's like, well, as an ordinary being, we can't really do it. Like right now, as much as I might want to free all beings from suffering, there's nothing that an ordinary being can do to bring this about. So then you need to check, well, how is this possible? Who has this ability to actually benefit all sentient beings and to help them with freedom from their suffering? And when you check, well, it's like the richest person in the world, no matter how much money you have. So that's not going to free all sentient beings from their suffering. The most powerful, like Donald Trump, can't do it. Like he's president of the US, can't do it. Doctors can't do it. Sort of generals can't do it with armies. So when you actually check, who has this ability? Well, the Buddha, a fully enlightened being. Only a Buddha has this ability. And why is that? Well, it's because only a Buddha clearly and completely understands sentient beings and how their minds work and what causes their suffering. And through that understanding, he is then able to teach them how to gain freedom from this suffering. So, based on that understanding, seeing this wish to help all sentient beings who have been our mothers attain freedom from suffering, and the understanding that only a fully enlightened being has this ability to actually do that, then one generates this wish, this need to attain enlightenment in order to benefit sentient beings. And this is Semkya is like to produce this mind of bodhicitta. At that point, this mind of bodhicitta is born when those things are combined.
어다 semje thongma thoba ane teaching salam thobes semje thongma thoba teaching salam thob ane teaching salam thobne ta sanje ji goma thoba ko bang ro ko bang la ko be zao khare timoti ji mari go poya ta je tongba ni to go ra ane ne salam ne ga to ni to ane ne to ni to je to ni le be gumjung ki lo thoba ta teaching jolam na to yo jolam thobo jolam teaching jolam 돈이는 공중로 하고 hearing knowledge and the some 검사하고
토섬 검래
검중 싫어 어디 토섬 검배 싫어 검중 돈이는 매 검발이거와 사람 내가서 돈이 some 아니 검배 로지로 하더니 조람도 거
Okay, yep. So now we get on to... so we've said that when one generates this mind of bodhicitta, when this mind of bodhicitta is produced, that is the entry point to the path, the first of the 5 paths, the path of accumulation. And at this point, one then checks. So one checks, how is it that I can attain the state of liberation and enlightenment? Well, the only way to do it is to remove this self-grasping, right? And this is done through the understanding of emptiness, the wisdom that realizes selflessness or emptiness. So one accumulates all this knowledge and understanding, and at the point of entry to Gomjum, so like the point of entry to meditate, the wisdom that's able to meditate on emptiness, I guess, or Gomjum Gishurb, sorry, the wisdom of meditation. When one gets this, so when you have the 3, you have the 3 of listening, reflecting, and meditating. When you're able to actually enter the point of meditating on selflessness, that's when you enter the path of preparation.
돈이 무슨도 더디 안에 돌람토 통수가 돈이 무슨도 통마데 돌람샤 돌람 다디 단단한 저 람덴셰서 람데 제마시나 람덴셰도 되다 돈이 무슨도 걸라
오케이
돈이 무슨도 걸라들라 통람데 어디 람덴레 어디
okay. So then when you actually meditate on this emptiness, at the point when you actually get the direct realization of emptiness, or the wisdom, the direct wisdom that realizes selflessness, that's when you enter the path of seeing. And at this point of this path of seeing is actually also the entry point to the truth of the path.
이게 녀모 방도 봐. 대 녀모 라고데 방용지 녀모 방배 방바저와 어디로 거든서 왔다. 거든.
So did Tonlam
요. tonlam 남들람 세저와 따디 말아비 거든 코에 뭐냐체 아니 되기도 녀모 라고데 방용지 대 방배 방바들라 거든스. 아무도 단다 템바시나 그 람덴다 거든스서. 어디네미지 토고요 말다.
So when one has truly abandoned this gross delusions, from the gross level of delusions, at this point, then that is said to be, which is the entry to the path of seeing. That is also said to be the truth of cessation. So when one attains this understanding and has abandoned the delusions on the grosser level, then one has actually attained this truth of cessation.
나와산예 군조 숨지데 추군조세도 어디 다 추군조데 람덴다 복덴데 추군조서 그래 추군조데 cap모인서 그래서 뭐네 cap도 그래 되다 추군조.
So when we talk about the Dharma, and specifically when we say the Dharma jewel, this Dharma jewel is this path, the truth of liberation. The truth of liberation and the path to liberation. This is what we really mean when we say this Dharma jewel.
아디 줄을 때문에 간단한데라 파과라고 파과. 근데 내가 기두군조 파과 Rakwa Kansa.
Okay. And these Arya beings, these beings who have this direct understanding of selflessness, this direct realization of selflessness, they're said to be the jewel of the Sangha.
Adi Nyumu Rakwa Panrava. That Nyumu Tamul Hadeva. Nyumu Tamu Paya Yangja Tongwani Gomja Yundi. And Tijan Gonam Chat and Gonam.
Now, as we said, at the point of the entry to the path of seeing, you have the direct realization of selflessness. And at this level, you've abandoned all the gross levels of delusions. But the subtle level, the subtle imprints of the delusions still remain. And to abandon those or to work through those, you actually have to continually meditate again and again and again. And this is the path of meditation. And this is the 10 bhumis. Bhumis, yeah, 10 grounds.
10 grounds. That the jailer, and you remember than Chija Tama Pangdu, and it's a jet of water.
And at the point when you've completely abandoned the subtlest delusions from their roots, this is the path of no more learning or Buddhahood. And yeah, the attainment of enlightenment. And that's it. Job done. Okay, now we're done. We've attained enlightenment. Finished.
Is there a special demarcation when you pass from the path of seeing to the path of meditation, like you know, a special attainment or something that says right now you've gone from seeing to meditation?
Okay, so the Tonglam and the Gomlam, the Badu, so the Tonglam Sakabla and the Gomlam Juk, Kandi Hakoguduru.
Tonglam Gomlam the Nyamsha Yamana, Koga Simji Arva, Koga Dingins in the and then Yomo Tamu when you chasnana, Uncle Gomlam.
Okay, so when
Tonglam in the Gas in Yomora Wabara, and Yanga Gomja Dingins and Gomja, and a call a power leader. Power leaders and Yomo Tamu Mevos of the Ni Chagro.
Okay.
What to do in the Gogonam Charo? The Nyamsha chicken and the word.
Okay. So the differentiation comes from the type of delusions you're purifying. So in the path of seeing, you've abandoned the gross delusions, right? And then your mind, through developing your tenuzin, right? So developing a more subtle level of concentration, then your mind gets the power to actually start to eradicate the delusions, the subtle delusions. And when you start to eradicate the subtle delusions, that's when you enter the path of meditation. Is that good? Okay. That's us. Four Noble Truths. Yeah.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
So, can Geshe please explain what are the other ways that a Buddha can benefit the beings other from the path and the teachings and
Okay.
so on?
So, Kiran Sansan, the Sangye Chikpo, the Semchin Tamchi Pembache. You call this love Kandija, the Kandid Pembache.
Manzula Tanda, Manzul Lamashurva. Manzula Sanji Chu, Tando Sunje, another Buddha Tameg number danger, Jolin, Tamek Tama, Manam Semje Tamewe, number danger, any Kigan chair, the church, Toku chair, other than this Pembache will race. And Tonam listener, and Lungu Moneg, Sanja Moneg, Polishes, Labure, Tonam. Moneg, Sanja Mois Ligo, Sanja Mois Leger, or Church, Tonam listener, and Tonam Angela, sounds like Gigan, sounds like Tobo, and it in the number danger, and it Jolin, Church, Simji 24 res. Or the 20 done in this year.
So we now, right, as ordinary beings, we have to rely on physical teachers like human beings to teach us, or books and texts and these things, right? When you actually reach the path of seeing, so you have this direct realization of emptiness, then you can see the Buddhas directly, like we talk to each other, you know. Then these beings, they can have like a little chat with the Buddhas directly, right? So this is how like the Buddhas can directly benefit those beings who can actually see them. Good day.